This is the beginning of your section 2. So this is going to be 4.2a. Another teacher will be taking care of the rest of this for you. Make sure they're focused in here. Him. Unpin that. Okay. So for this recording, so we have to do today. 1, we're going to talk about how to graph systems of inequalities. Now this relates very much so to our last unit that we had in Unit 3. Where in systems of equations, you're talking about two equations, 1 and 2. Previously, we've talked about how to do systems of equations, but what you'll notice that is different about this one is these are inequalities, okay? And we'll discuss how to do it. In section 1, we talked about shading, but now we need to know how to shade when there are two graphs rather than one, when there are two inequalities rather than one. So, start, I'm going to have, what I think is a very helpful way of doing this is to have two pens. We're going to get there in a second on how to do this, but for right now, let's review on how to graph each line. Okay, so on A, we obviously want to start here at 3. Okay, our plus 3 is going to be our y-intercept. We start here at the plus 3. Because it's 5 over 3, we go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're off our graph here, but that's fine. 1, 2, 3. We're going to be somewhere over there. So let's do the opposite to be able to keep going that line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Two negatives make a positive. And now we have our first two dots. And let's draw a line for it. See that our dots line up pretty well with each other. So we're good to go. Now, B is obviously a little bit different. The idea here is to get our y alone. Currently, y is not alone. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move this 4x over by a subtraction. Our new equation will be 3y equals a negative 4x minus 3. I then want to divide away the 3 from both sides. Remember, I'm dividing everything on the right side by 3, not just the letter, not just the variable, and not just the constant. So what will that give me? My new equation is going to be y equals negative 4 over 3 is just negative 4/3, x, and then negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. So now that we have this, we start by graphing at our negative 1 on the y-axis, and then it's negative 4, 3. So my first move should be down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I always like to move right. It keeps it very consistent in my head. And then we want to do the opposite. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Get as many dots as you can onto this graph, because then you're more accurate with every single one of your graphs. All right, similar thing is going to happen here. Again, we want to get our y alone so we can graph it just like we did here and just like we have here with our original y. First thing I need to do is subtract my 8 to both the other side. So now I have negative 2y equals negative 3x minus 8. With that information now, let's divide both sides by a negative 2. The negative 2's cancel. That should leave me with y equals negative 3, negative 2. Two negatives will make a positive. Negative 8 and negative 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, so we got a positive 4. Okay. Once again, I'm going to start here at 1, 2, 3, 4, where it tells me on the y-axis because of this number right here. Oh, hold on, my bad. Because of this number right here. And then from there, we need to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, right 2, 1, 2. We're a little bit off the graph, but that's okay. And then let's do the opposite. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. We got to make that straight line here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, remember your top number is going to be determining whether or not you're going up or down. If it's negative, you go down, positive, you go up. And then vice versa when you're working backwards. Okay? Now, that's the begin. This is our practice in graphing. A couple things I would suggest for you at this point. I would suggest getting two pens, different colors. If it is totally possible to do this with just a pencil. In fact, I do it most of the time on my assignments as well. But just for the sake of understanding which line is which and deciphering between the two, I find it best to have two different colored pens to help me with this. Okay, I know that Miss Murdoch normally has different colors for her lines as well when she does her videos. So, this is just a review, and this is more of like a cheat sheet for us, okay? And the idea is that I can tell what each of my inequalities should be, at least where I'm shading, based on this cheat sheet, okay? And here, this is the important part for us. Just give me 1 second, I'll find what I'm looking for. Okay, what you'll notice on each of these is that the inequality is facing a different direction based on whether or not you're shading above or below it, okay? The mouth is facing towards the left, meaning y is greater than, okay? That means you're going to be shading above it. How I normally like to think of this is like if you had a roof, all right? When I say above, it's going to be shading above the roof, okay? Greater than. Less than, we're shading below the roof, okay? It's less than the height of the roof, how I like to think about it. And then, if you remember from our first section, the difference between something like this and something like this is whether or not it's dashed versus solid. If it's just greater than, it's dashed. If it's greater than or equal to, it's solid. And the reason why is we have to account for the fact that our line can be a solution to this problem. Okay, equal to. Then we have at y is less than or equal to, or less than or equal to, a solid line that's below. Now, how I like to think about these ones right here. The best way that we can do the x's, because these are kind of our special boys here. We need to worry about what they will tell us to do is shade on the line, is shade on the side that is the inequality is pointing at. Okay, so how I like to say it is inequality points in direction to shade. That's the best way for me to think about it. Okay, you can see here x is greater than our a, but look at what the inequality is pointing at. The right. And what does this say? Right. Points left, we go left. Okay, this is only when x is a variable on that side. Okay, this is only possible if we don't have a y in there as well. And the same thing applies to these ones as well, right, left. So I actually should probably put them in there as well. Okay, points right, it goes right. Points left, it goes left. That's only when x is our variable. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's move on then to solving each system of inequality by graphing. Notice there are two. And just like I said, mentioned at the very beginning, it's similar to our first section 1 of this notes. If you haven't done those yet, I would suggest you do those now. Okay. So I'm going to use 2 pens for this so you can tell the difference between the 2 lines that I'm going to draw. So I'm going to do the first line in green and the second line will be in red. Christmas colors so you can recognize the difference between them. Okay. And we're going to graph each of these lines accordingly. So when you're graphing an inequality, you want to remember it's just like graphing one of these equations that we did up here. Okay, this tells us where we start, and this number tells us how much we're changing by. So let's do that. So y is less than x minus 5. So negative 5 is where we're starting from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my first dot. And remember, this imaginary 1 is floating in front of our x. That should tell us how much we're moving up and down by. So because it's a positive 1, we go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and so on. Okay. And we just want to do the opposite to get our full line. Now, if you'll remember from this, from your last notes, we have to remember when to have something dashed and when to have something solid. The difference is this one is not equal to, this one is. So if there's a line underneath it, it's a line. If there is not, it's a dash. Okay. So let me put those dashes in through here so you can kind of see them. Just like that. And that's a great line enough. That's good enough for me. Okay. Now let's look at y is less than or equal to 3. So if we haven't learned it up to this point, we need to learn this now. If y is less than or equal to 3, it means that we have to go to 3 on the y-axis. 1, 2, 3. And then we have to just draw that line right passing through this point. Okay, it's going to be a horizontal line. Now the thing about this, it's a solid line. So there's our two lines. Right there. Now we have to worry about what it's asking us to do. Okay, what I like to think about this as, let's take them one at a time, and I'd like to draw two x's to tell me where I'm shading based on one line at a time. Okay, so just hold that in your mind while I explain it. It says y is less than x minus 5. If you remember, less than tells us that we need to shade below or under the house. So on this green one, okay, I would shade below the roof. Since the only thing below the roof is this, I'm going to put an X there. Now it says that y is less than or equal to 3. That means we're going to shade below this red line. So the things that are, the two areas that are below it are this one and this one. Wherever I have the two X's is the indicator of where I should shade. Every other section is going to have 0 X's, 1 X, or 1 X. I want to shade where there's 2 because there's only one place that's going to have 2. I shade here, and that's my answer. Okay, now let's go on to our next one and we can get a little bit more practice here. X is greater than or equal to 4. So, same idea as what we did here on y is less than or equal to 3, but this time instead of using the y-axis like we did on the last one, we will use the x-axis. So, I go 1, 2, 3, 4 on the x-axis. There's a line underneath it, so it's a solid line. I like to keep my lines straight so you guys can see them. Right there. From here, make sure that you're shading, make sure that we can go over to our red one. Remember, I want to make sure that my y, that all my variables that I'm solving for are going to be on the left-hand side of my equation. So y is on our right-hand side, so let's flip it. The mouth is open towards y, so it's going to be open towards it when we flip it as well. Okay, so y is greater than 0 is our number. Y is greater than 0. That's 0 on the y-axis. It's a dashed line, so I'm going to kind of put it a little bit up so you can kind of see it a little bit better through here. We're just going to have a dashed line running atop here. Just like that. Now, let's kind of walk through each one, what it's asking us to do. Remember what it says over here. X is greater than or equal to A, meaning it's whatever direction it's pointing is the way that we're going to shade it. Since it's pointing to the right, we're going to shade it on one of these two sections on the right hand of X. These two are on the left hand, so we wouldn't put an X there. Now y is greater than 0. Since it's greater than, that means that we need to shade above the roof. Okay, so the things that are above the roof, this one and this one. What do we notice? There are no X's here. There is one X here, one X here, but there's two X's here. We need to shade where there's two X's. Okay. Next page. And these will be a little bit longer because we're going to have to solve for a lot of these equations. You'll be our nice little break. Okay. Once again, I'm going to put green here on this top one. I'm going to put red here on the bottom one. I'm going to do that for all of them actually. Just right now. Green on top, green here, and then we'll do red bottom. Red, red, and red. Okay, so having done that, let's now solve for these equations. It's just like we did on the very beginning where we had to practice how to graph again. We want to make sure that y is alone. Currently, y is not alone. So what do we have to do for that? Move your x, divide by the thing in front of the y. That's always how it's going to be. Subtract my 2x from both sides. My new equation will be negative 3y greater than negative 2x plus 6. It's positive 6 after all. We're going to divide by negative 3. Now, the difference between these, what we're doing now, and our last one, or at least our practice equations that we did at the very beginning, is that when I divide by a negative, if you'll remember this from a couple sections ago, this would have been section 2, I believe. when we divide by a negative on an inequality, meaning we have a greater than or less than sign, we need to make sure that we are flipping this sign. So y is not going to be greater than anymore, it will be less than. Okay, then we have 2/3 x minus 2. Then let's do our red one as well, just so we have that in check. Subtract your 5x, subtract your 5x. Go on. For y is less than negative 5x plus 12. Divide by 4. Divide everything by 4. So the 4's cancel. Y is going to be less than. And why is this one less than and this one isn't? And this one had to get flipped. Well, what are we dividing by here? We're dividing by a positive 4. Here we were dividing by a negative 3, so that's why we had to flip it. So negative 5 over 4x plus 3. That's our number, because 12 divided by 4 is 3. So let's get to it now. So first thing that I notice about this is both of these lines are going to be dashed. So that makes, just have that in mind while you're doing this. We started at a negative 2. And then I need to go up 2, right 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to be over here somewhere. Then do the opposite, down 2, left 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to be somewhere over here. Okay. Get my ruler out. Make sure I'm going to get you guys a good line here so you can see them. Remember, these are dashed lines that we're working with here. Got to make sure that they're pretty accurate. So you can see that. Dashed lines. And then we're going to do the red one next. We're going to start at a positive 3. 1, 2, 3. Or no, oh my, sorry, I apologize. Positive 3. So we're starting here at 0, 1, 2, 3. Then negative 5 fours. We're going to go down 5 because it's a negative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to go right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I wouldn't be too worried about this. It's not like our last test where we want to look for where they're meeting on that point. In inequalities, you don't necessarily have to have the graph meeting at a specific point. This graph is not going to, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. As you can see, I guarantee you I did this right. Okay, I'm positive, but we're not meeting at a specific point. That's okay. All right, at least in this section it is. Most others, we're never going to really try and make you, on a graph, find it at a non-whole number. That would be kind of cruel. All right. Now, what can we do with this information? So remember, we want to go over here. We want to do the x things. If I'm looking at this, it says y is less than, meaning we want to look under the roof. Everything under the roof is going to be on this side of my line. Okay, since it's under this roof. What about the red one? Well, what's under this roof over here? That's above roof for sure, because that's where if I have snow falling, it's going to fall right on top of that. So I need to cross out these sections and these sections. Again, what do we notice? Well, 0, 1, 1, and I need to shade where there are 2 x's. Just like that. Okay? All right, let's move on to our next example. Same idea again as we did on the last one. Here, we want to move our x, then divide by what's ever in front of our y. So, subtract your x. My new equation is negative 2y. Let's find that out. Negative 2y less than negative x plus 8. We're then going to divide by negative 2. And we should end up with, because we're dividing by a negative, remember, we want to flip that inequality. So it's going to change between these two. Okay, negative 1, negative 2, it's going to give me 1/2 x, and then 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. Okay, for our next one, it's a little bit more simple. All we have to do is subtract the x. There's nothing in front of the y, so we end up with y is greater than or equal to negative x plus 5. Now, with that in mind, let's graph these two lines. Green one, we want to start at negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to go up 1, right 2. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. And I'm just going to kind of move here, so I don't want to take up most of your time here, which is the graphing. If you need to, you can skip ahead. Okay, so y is greater than. So we're going to try and Put the dashes here because once again, this doesn't have a line underneath it, so we got to dash it up. Okay. And then what are we doing from here? Let's graph our next one. So remember, this is a -1 over 1. We want to think about it like that. So out of your positive 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we're going to go down 1 because it's negative, and then right 1. Now in this case, the dots do meet, so that's fine with us. Doesn't necessarily matter because we care more about the shading and less about where they're meeting. And this is a solid line, right? If I have an inequality where there's a line underneath it, it's got to be solid. So let's put our line there. You know, if you ever screw up, the best thing that you can do, whether or not you, if you're doing this with pen or something like that, here's what I would do. I would just say this is dashed over here in the little corner of your line so you can tell. Okay, that'll let your teacher know that you accidentally did it, so you don't have to redo your entire graph. But most of the time, you want to make sure that you're not doing this on a regular basis. Let's make sure that we're getting these dashed lines, okay? Now, let's go through in here and let's mark our x's. Let's start with the green one. Y is greater than 1/2 x minus 4. That means that we're going to start at the top. That means we're going to be above the roof, this green roof, which is what I'm using the green for. X and X. Those are the two sections above my green. And then this one says y is greater than or equal to that. So that means we're going to be above as well, above the roof, or on top of the roof on this one. Okay. Once again, 0x, 1x, 1x. I need a shape where there are two of them. Okay. All right. Let's move on to our break problem. I don't have to solve for anything here. This makes it really simple for me, so I don't have to take up much more of your time. X is greater than or equal to -3. Remember, this is a little bit different of a line. You want to go all the way to the -3 on the x-axis. Okay. We're going to have a straight up and down line as it passes through that point. Then for the red one, okay, remember, that's equal to, so we want that straight line. This one's going to be dashed, right, because it doesn't have that greater than. That's not less than or equal to, it's less than. So start at your +3, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to go up 2, right 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And do your opposite, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then we're off the graph, so I'm not going to do that one. Then just give yourselves your dash. Just like that. That'll look good. Okay, now let's kind of interpret it. Remember, on the very first side, it told us that the x's were the only ones that were a little bit different. The x should tell us which side it points to the side that we're shading on. So this points right for the x, so we want to shade on the right side of my green to that section, and that section are the ones that are on the right side of my green. This one says that less than, so that means we're under the roof, meaning that we're below the roof of the house. We want to take over here, I think this section and this section are going to be the two. This section has two x's, so we're going to shade this section in. Doesn't have to be a perfect shading, but that should be good enough right there. You can clearly tell where I'm shading. All right. I don't want you guys to just write out the two x's. You want to shade this in. So that was our break problem. Let's get back to actually solving things now. If I'm looking at green, okay, I'm going to write down one of my inequalities down here so we actually have a little bit more room to work with. So I'm working with 4x plus 3y greater than -6. Okay. First thing I want to do is subtract that 4x, 3y greater than -4x minus 6. Divide by 3 on both sides. Everything. Y is greater than -4.